All right, so black and white images trace pretty well in Illustrator. There can be little problems. Like if you notice on this P, for whatever reason, the anchor jogged there. But I can always merge those anchor points and smooth it out. But what Illustrator does not trace so well are images that are full color, especially that are really photographic. So this, even though it's low resolution, it was able to give me a pretty good clean image of it. Though it got rid of the bow tie completely. So I'd have to recreate that just because it's so low resolution. But what about an image like this? That's a pretty high resolution photo, but it's got lots of soft edges and lots of gradated color. So if I take this, save it to the desktop, and then bring that into an Illustrator file, I'll just open it within Illustrator. And because it's a JPEG, as soon as I click on it, it will give me my image trace options. And I say I want to trace it as a high fidelity photo. There we go. It does the very best it can. But what it's going to do is make a bunch of individual paths that are filled in with solid colors, all kind of puzzled together. And then if I expand it, this is what it looks like. And so when we look at the individual paths, there are so many of them that it almost becomes kind of meaningless camouflage. Right? It no longer communicates any edges, because it takes all that softness and it has to make it into, little cutouts of paper, basically. And even all the white shapes like this is an individual path. And this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Right? So it's always better to work from something that's as simplified as possible. And sometimes we even want to simplify it in Photoshop first before we bring it over. Okay, now let's not talk about tracing anymore. And let's instead talk about making our own image. So I'm going to go to Illustrator, and you can follow along with me, and say File, New. And I'm going to call this my name, and then an Illustrator intro robot. We want the profile to be print. We want to set all of Illustrator's presets for printing. We want it to be able to be full color. The artboard, we just want it to be on one artboard. That's kind of the printing paper it would go on. The size of the artboard, we might as well make it letter size, because then our font points will make sense to us. But remember, there's no resolution with vectors. So I say OK. Now, it starts me off with a default here, with a black outline stroke and a white fill. But I'm going to change that, and I'm just going to make the stroke be none, because there's already a white artboard behind. Okay. And you notice if you swap that, then it turns from being a black stroke with no fill to being a black fill with no stroke. So you can always kind of swap between. And then you can always go back to the defaults by clicking on that corner. Okay, now the stroke I want to use, let's see, let's make it a little bit thicker. Let's make it 3 points. And I'm going to do it with the uniform. And so what is that going to look like? Well, to find out, I'm going to use the pencil tool. This is my favorite tool in Illustrator, just the regular pencil tool. And what I want to draw is the shape of a robot. Robots are great. They can be any kind of weird shape, right? But I want to make sure I close my path. which pretty much means I can't ever lift up my pencil. So this is in drawing what you call a contour drawing, and I outline its path. And then when I get near the end, you'll see a little zero or a little circle appear next to the pencil. That means that I'm close to where I started. It wants to close the path. If I let go now, it will close the path for me. And it will trace it with the 3-point line. While it's still selected, I can change that to a thicker line. I can change it to being less of an even line. Or I can change it to be built with a round, which is kind of nice if I have things at the edges. Okay, so now I have my outline, but the problem is it's not symmetrical at all. And it's like, darn, I really like some of the things, but it looks very unmechanical, right? So let me try it with a different tool other than the pencil, because the pencil's really good at these kind of wonky organic shapes. So let me select these all with the big selection tool and then just hit delete and they're all gone. Now we're going to use the classic tool in Illustrator. It's called the pen tool. And the pen tool, you don't just draw freehand, though there is a freehand pen tool which works pretty well. Instead, we're going to plot a point. So I'm going to click at the top, then I'm going to click somewhere over here, and then I'm going to drag out to make a curve. And then I'm going to pick another point. But if I don't want it to be a curve, I'm going to hold down. I'll just make it really simple. I'm just going to go to the pen tool, and I'm going to delete that anchor. And you can do that just by clicking on them. Oh. And you can also add anchors. And you can also use Command Z. But let's play with this pen tool a little bit. So if we click and just drop, it's a straight line. If we click and we work around, it will give us perfectly straight edges, a polygon, right? But if we click and hold, then we can get a curve if we drag out the curve. But then the next line will be a curve unless we convert the anchor point. So to do that, we right click on it, and we can make all these modifications that we like. We can also change the pen tool or the individual anchors, and we can close the path, and we can use the small selection tool to move individual anchors around and refine the path, especially if it's twisted on itself. So this is a very kind of different drawing tool. So when playing with the pen tool, you can make straight lines, you can click and drag and make curves, and then you can go to the anchor point tool, which you can always get to through the pen tool just by holding down Option. And you can convert curves into straights. Now, how does this actually work for drawing? Because it's a very different interface. So if I want a perfectly symmetrical robot, and this is what we're all going to try, I'm not going to draw all sides of the robot. I'm just going to draw one side, right? And then close that loop. So I'm going to use the pen tool. I'll make it a really simple robot. Start at the top. I'm going to go down here and make it a curve. Then I'm going to hold down Option and convert it. and make a straight line. And then I'm going to make, actually I don't want one that long, make a straight line to here. Then I want to go out and make an arm, go out again. I'm going to make this with a lot of straight edges. Make a claw. Get back to here. Go back to the body. And it will show you these little guides when things line up. Go to the bottom of my robot, and now I want to curve it at the bottom. So I drag out again. But I don't want it to make a new curve, so I hold down Option and I convert it. So that now I can do straights again. You can always do Command Z if you weren't happy with how straight you went. If you want to go perfectly flat or perfectly horizontal, you just hold down Shift while you do your straights. So I'll go hold down Shift. That will make a perfectly flat line. Now I want a slight curve. This is the hardest thing, getting used to switching the curves with the anchor points. And then hold down Option and convert it back to a straight. And get to here, and then I want to close the loop. Okay? Now this looks like it's part of the drawing. It looks like a little antenna, but it is not. It is just a handle. If I want to get rid of that handle, if I hold down Command, let's see. There we go. Strange. I can get rid of it, usually with just a small selection tool, which for some reason was being really hard to find. I also have this little overlap here, which I don't know that I like. And so with the small selection tool, I can find the anchor that gave me that. And I can move it back in. So I have complete control of all of these anchor points, which are on this path. Okay. Now I want to draw legs, and I want to add them, but they're going to be a new shape. So what I do now is I'm going to use the Add Anchor Point tool. And I'm going to say, okay, I want one right here. And then I'm going to draw the pin tool from there. So I add one, just because I'm on the existing path. And I want the leg to go down. And then I want a slightly curved ankle, so I click and drag. Takes a few tries sometimes. And if you want a perfect curve, hold down Shift while you do it. It will give you a 45-degree curve. Then I'm going to do Option, convert, so I can do straights again. Then Option again, so I can do curves again. And then Option again, so I can do straights again, on and on and on. And then from there, maybe I want to do a curve up to here. So I just click on the anchor. And now convert it again and go straight up back to this path. But if I want a straight line, hold down Shift. And so on and so on. Okay, so now I have two strokes making up my robot. That one and that one. They're both going to show up as individual strokes in my layer group as individual paths. But I want to select them all, like so. I can also do it with the large selection tool, dragging through like that. And now I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to flip it. So I say Edit, Copy. And then I say Edit, Paste in Place. And now I hold down Shift, and I'm still on the large selection tool, and I'm just going to